were at the Heckscher Museum of Art at an exhibition titled Emma Stebbins Carving Out History, the first retrospective of this important American 19th century artist who most New Yorkers are familiar with because she's responsible for the wonderful sculpture, The Angel of the Waters, that is the Bethesda Fountain in Central Park.
We're looking at two works called Commerce and Industry, or The Sailor and the Miner.
So these works were not made for her own inventory that she then hoped to sell, but as was common with sculpture, these were made on commission.
Marble is expensive and the process of carving it is laborious, so artists would not start carving marble until you had someone who was going to pay for this fine work of art. In this instance, the person who commissioned them was Charles Heckscher, an uncle of the person who founded the Heckscher Museum of Art, which is how these works came to be here. And Charles Heckscher made his fortune in coal mining and in shipping. He tasked Stebbins with creating sculptures that would attest to his business acumen. And what we're seeing here is the answer she came up with.
So we're seeing this pair of sculptures in a public museum, but in fact they were intended for a private space, for the enjoyment not only of the patron, but of his family and his friends.
What's interesting about these two works, though, is they do reach a public. Emma Stebbins is carving these in her studio in Rome, and her studio was sometimes open to the public. And she would also invite journalists and friends to come and see her works in process. So accounts of these two works start showing up in the press in 1859. Then in 1860, the marble carvings are completed. They are shipped from Rome. They're shown in a gallery in New York City. They're also shown in Boston and in Philadelphia. The critics are really enamored of these. And they're the first works that Stebbins shows publicly, so they're key to her reputation. As a woman who's born in New York City in 1815, there is no art school she could have gone to, and she certainly could not have worked from the living nude male model. But in Rome, she has a lot more freedom to pursue her training, to apprentice as a stone carver and a sculptor, and she has just a lot more personal and professional opportunities and freedoms in Rome.
And these are the result. This is beautiful white marble. And in the 19th century, that would have meant that it is part of this continuous tradition that reaches all the way back to ancient Rome and ancient Greece by way of the Renaissance. The figures stand in beautiful contrapposto. That is, the weight is on one leg while the other leg is free. One hip juts up. There's a kind of S-curve in the spine, and the shoulders and head respond as well. And this method of representing the human body is tied to the classical tradition. And so this is part of this neoclassicism, this revival, this new classicism.
She wants to do two things here. She wants to work in the neoclassical tradition and to place herself in this long history. At the same time, she's pushing at the conventions of what neoclassicism can be.
One of the things that strikes me as most original in a curious way is the fact that she has dressed her neoclassical nudes.
Stebbins' peers are often sculpting the idealized nude human form, often the female form. And Stebbins is one of the first artists, if not the first sculptor, who is American, who has decided to sculpt working class American figures wearing the contemporary clothing of their time and of their professions. In the case of industry or the miner, wearing and holding the tools of their trade. No one else was doing this.
The sailor is leaning against what looks to be a bollard, and we can get a sense that we're outside because the neckerchief is blowing in the wind. We have this beautiful neoclassical face. But then we have these sideburns, which remind me of sailors of the mid-19th century.
In the pose is borrowed from The Leaning Satyr, a classical work that was pretty well known because Nathaniel Hawthorne writes the book The Marble Faun, which is in some ways inspired by The Leading Satyr. But at the same time, this is again a very contemporary depiction, so she's melding these two things.
The sailor, though he is absolutely idealized, I can believe that he is a sailor. It's a little more challenging when I look at the miner, because the beauty and elegance of his body seems to me at odds with the labor and filth and sweat that was a part of that work.
Mining at this time, and specifically the mines that belonged to Heckscher, this was difficult work, often performed by immigrants, sometimes performed by children, underground and dangerous. So it's an interesting topic for her to be addressing in this beautiful white Carrara stone. Interesting that the shirt is unbuttoned almost all the way down to his navel. He is holding a pickaxe and wearing a miner's helmet. We know from 19th century photographs that there's a piece of marble missing that would have been a flame, and this is how the miners could see underground. And it's hailed in the press as really embodying this ideal of American labor as manly and heroic and beautiful. This is definitely America moving away from those agrarian roots, becoming a real player economically, globally, and industrializing. And America's sense of itself is changing and being mediated through artworks like this.